Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Navigating Elder Care. My name is Jason Brown. I'm the Director of Advisor Success here at Foster Group, and I'm joined by three others today, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves. The first is Stacy Nusendorfer. Hi, Stacy.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Stacy Nusendorfer, and I am a Senior Lead Advisor at Foster Group in our Omaha office.
The second is Mary Vandernack.
I'm Mary Vandernack. I am a tax trust and estate attorney. I founded the firm Vandernack, Weaver, and Trulson in Omaha, Nebraska.
And the final is Marion Weaver.
Hi, my name is Marion Weaver. I'm care coordinator for Vandernack, Weaver, Trulson, and I'm the navigator for their long-term care.
And I just want to say thanks to Stacy, Mary, and Marion for joining us today. First, a few housekeeping items. This video will be recorded. You'll be receiving a link to that. It's scheduled to go 30 minutes long. And at the bottom of the page is going to be a Q&A button. We're not going to have any time to get to questions today, but we will make sure to respond to any questions that you have. Before we really get rolling on the subject of elder care, all three of you mentioned the need for good communication across the board. And Marion, you specifically mentioned the need for good communication with the one that's being cared for.
Absolutely, Jason. That is so important because it lets them know that they're respected, they're valued, and that their opinion matters. You know, they may be feeling like they're a burden and they're useless. And so to help address their dignity, that they matter is so important. They're going through a lot of fears, you've got to remember, feelings of a sense of loss of control over their future. So it'll help them to talk through what's on their minds and kind of open up that to be a two-way street. So the caretaker will know what's going on as well. And you can help them, you know, with communication, you can help them make decisions, especially referring to their preferences and their wishes on what type of living options is going to be so important to talk through what that looks like and if their wishes are actually possible.
And Stacy and Mary, it's not just good communication with the one being cared for, but the two of you talked about how important it is to have good communication with all the people who are doing the caring as well.
I'm currently in the middle of moving my 91-year-old mom today as we're doing this webinar. The moving trucks are at her home, picking up her items to move her into an independent living facility. So my whole family's gathered about. So it's the communication among all of us and supporting her. And I would just mention the other thing is the nonverbal communication. You can kind of watch my mom and you'll see her get really quiet at times. So you want to kind of notice and ask the question, what else is going on? And then just get everybody to go silent and really listen.
Mm-hmm.
I just would echo what Marianne and Mary said regarding the communication. I think it's important to try and have those conversations really before a person has to move, perhaps. When everyone is not emotional. And oftentimes our clients say, you know, I want to remain independent. I do not want to be a burden on my children. And sometimes I think it's a shift in mindset to realize that, you know, moving perhaps to a senior community is a way of remaining independent. If you choose that community and you get to, you know, make some decisions rather than having your children have to make those decisions when they're forced into it because perhaps your health has taken a turn for the worse. So I think it's just important to try and have those conversations as early as possible.
Well, and Stacy, you kind of alluded to the next subject we want to address, which is actually the safety of our loved one and how that's connected to the place where they're going to live. And Marion, why don't you kick off the conversation there?
Well, if you ask an elderly person where they want to live, most times they're going to say, I want to stay at home as long as possible if I can. I want to point out that usually families become aware that there might be a problem after a holiday visit when they really see what's going on and they spend a lot of time in the home. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is to evaluate the safety of the current living arrangement. take a look at both the physical and the mental capacity of your loved one. You can look around and see, is that person holding on to furniture, holding on to walls when they're walking? We call it wall walking. Are they stumbling a little bit? Are they having trouble getting into the bathtub because that tub is, 1 to 2 feet high, and so they're not showering anymore? Cognitively, you're going to want to look at, are they forgetting to lock the doors? Are they forgetting to turn off the stove when they're cooking? All of those are red flags. And if you see some of those things, you're going to want to reach out for sure to your healthcare provider, let them know what's going on. And you can even request home health services in the home. And that means bringing in for a period of time therapy services, a nurse, a bath aide, to try to get that loved one back on their feet and give you time to evaluate, is this situation going to be safe? And do we need to do something about it? After home health, there's also non-medical home services. And so that would involve things like bringing in a companion, bringing in somebody for personal cares. That the elderly population, don't forget the fact that they get lonely when they're by themselves. So you're going to want to try to help decrease isolation. You're also going to want to assess that environment for home modifications. As I talked about, if the bathroom is difficult and they're wanting to stay in the home, maybe think about getting somebody in to install grab bars, put in a shower that's actually accessible to them if it's just a bathtub they can't get into. So lots of things to look at if that loved one wants to stay in the home.
And we know that they may want to stay there, but sometimes that's really not the best option for them. And Mary, when we were preparing for this, you wanted to remind our audience that when we think about some of the places that are available, it's not what we would have thought of, 30 years ago, a traditional nursing home.
So my mom's moving into a place currently that's independent living. It's a very nice apartment. They have restaurants, they have, community things. And so that is something I think that a lot of times you have to talk to them about get them to go tour actually, and get them to tour, as Stacy noted, early on, so that they see that it's a place, a community versus I'm going here to die. And it's something that creates opportunities as they have limitations.
And there are some incredible options that are available for our loved ones now. And Stacy, you said too that sometimes you can get your doctor to be helpful in getting that loved one to the right place.
Yes. My personal experience with my mother, being an only child, I had been speaking with her physician, and everybody who had encountered my mom asked me, have you considered moving her into assisted living? Which of course I had, but I knew it was going to be an extremely uphill battle. And so finally the doctor looked at me and said, look, I'll just take care of this. And he wrote a letter for me stating that she could not remain in her home, that it was not safe to do so, and that she had to move. And so while she was still very unhappy, seeing that letter, every time it came back to me making her move, I reminded her that it was her physician who said she had to move, and it wasn't me. And it took some of maybe the guilt off of me and a little bit less pressure from my mother. So don't be afraid to lean on your physician, and especially one with specialty perhaps in caring for people with a geriatric background.
So we talked about communication and living arrangements, and another one of the big things, and we hinted at it here, is the medical care that our loved ones require, and trying to bring all of that together. And it's actually quite complex, Marian.
Yes, absolutely. And Stacy, that's a great point, that you don't have to be the bad guy. Lean on your physicians. You have a team of medical professionals available. Usually people will start with their primary care physician, but don't forget that there are so many specialists out there. If you feel like your loved one needs a geriatrician who has a little bit more specialty than a primary care doctor, that's a great way to get started. If you're seeing signs of dementia, or you're seeing some behavior problems, a lot of times dementia will start as some memory loss, as we know, but aggressive behaviors if there's changes in in any type of behavior, and your loved one doesn't appear to be the same person anymore, you can bring in the neurologist, because there's probably things going on that the neurologist can address. A couple of other things, though, or resources that are out there, in the line of physicians, you can get a driving test for your loved one. And those driving tests they're so important because, like Stacy said, you can let them be the bad guys so that you don't have to take away the keys. There are geriatric psychiatrists out there. As we talked about, loneliness and isolation is a huge problem in the elderly population. So lean on those geriatric psychiatrists, and also nutritionists. For a variety of reasons, the elderly do not get the nutrition that they need, which leads to all sorts of problems physically and mentally. So be sure that your loved one is eating, and get that nutritionist on board if needed.
I think that's one of the things that struck me in talking with the three of you is just all of the people that can be available to help coordinate that medical care for your loved ones. And even with all that help, Stacy, you mentioned a little bit of a funny story in terms of, getting some help for your mom and it still being a challenge.
And actually it was for my grandmother. So I've been going generationally through challenges here with family members, but you can think you have all your ducks in a row and do everything. My grandmother needed some in-home assistance. And so she had a lady who would come a couple times a week to give her a bath. And my aunt would communicate to me that, the lady would come and my grandmother would send her away. And so my grandmother and I had a special relationship. And so I would, talk to her and say, now, Grandma, you've got to let the bath lady help you and bathe you. And she would look at me and smile and say, yep, I promise I will do it when she comes. And so, I thought I had it all set up and taken care of. And then my aunt would call me and say, your grandmother sent the bath lady away today. So, the best laid plans can go awry, and sometimes your loved one just will not cooperate.
Mm-hmm. Mary, anything you want to add to this?
I think the important thing, again, in watching my mom and many clients go through this phase, is simply also continuing to find ways to keep them independent and participatory in the process of medical care, and offering as many resources as we can.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked a lot about their physical health, and actually, Marion, early on in the conversation, you mentioned this, how much loneliness is often a factor. So we've also got the mental well-being of our loved ones to think about as well, and the help they need there.
Yes, absolutely. Loneliness is such a problem, those feelings of isolation. I was surprised to read, I did a little research, and the Cleveland Clinic last year came out with a study, and the statistics were astonishing. They showed that adults over age 65 account for 17% of all suicides in the United States, despite making up only 12% of the population. The number of those that complete suicide are higher in the geriatric population, than the adolescent population. We just hear more about the adolescent, the teenagers. And teenagers, they only follow through with 1 out of 200 suicides, but adults are 1 in 4 with their attempts. So trying to help connect those loved ones to the community, to activities, finding them counseling if they need counseling, but finding them a purpose is huge. They need to feel worthwhile.
And the caregiving can be incredibly taxing on the people doing it as well. You have to think about the emotional well-being of the one being cared for. But Stacy and Mary, both of you have had a lot of experience personally in caring, and it's absolutely crucial that your emotional well-being is good too.
It's absolutely crucial in that I say that whether it's caring for seniors, helping others in client capacity, or just going through our daily lives, we're no good to others unless we're taking care of ourselves generally. What I was taught very early in my career was to mark out time on my calendar. And I continue to do this quite a few years later. And what I do is I put it in there as corpus delicti. Right now, this is self-care. And that's how it goes in my calendar. And I don't compromise that for anything. And it's the first thing that goes in my calendar. It might be a massage, it might be a workout, it might just be a short walk around the building, but there needs to be some time carved out every single day for self-care.
I 100% agree with what Mary said. I think it's really important to remember that the caregivers experience a lot of stress and a lot of guilt. And I think sometimes, the parents, some of it is self-imposed guilt and some of it can be coming from the parent. They don't want somebody to come in home and help with them. They want the child to do that. Often that's a daughter. And I once had a very wise executive director of a facility, point out that don't you just want to go back to being the daughter and not being the caregiver? I mean, isn't that the better relationship to have? And for me, that was so helpful because it did help alleviate some of those feelings of guilt and actually led to a better relationship than having to be the caregiver.
Yeah, that struck me again in talking with the three of you who, you're right, Stacy, the caregiving oftentimes falls on the daughter or females in general. And that particular daughter oftentimes now has a full-time job, full-time career, is also the parent of kids and is now parenting their parent. It's a huge deal. So we want to spend a little time talking about some of the areas of expertise that Mary and Stacy are familiar with. So Mary, can you talk with us about all of the legal concerns that go into caring?
One of the things I like to say is I want to recouch the term estate plan to like life planning as opposed to estate planning, because estate means you're dead. And what really matters is what happens while you're still alive. So I think it's life planning. And that's why we use the term life care planning to incorporate both what Marian does, what we do legally, and what Stacy does on her end. The really important things is to think about what happens if I'm incapable, or just sometimes you might still have legal competence, presence of mind, but need some assistance. So kind of the starting point there is to have some basic documents in place to make sure if you're not able to take care of matters yourself, that things can be taken care of. As far as the personal health care, we have health care directives. Each state has a variety of kinds. There's actually, I'm going to be at a uniform law commission, and we're going to issue a new uniform law with all the lessons learned from the pandemic on this. But at the end of the day, there's the right to die will, which I'm not a big fan of because this just says, hey, if I'm in a terminal condition or persistent vegetative state, unplug me. What does that mean, really? So more helpful is what we call a healthcare power of attorney. And you can incorporate into that document what you want if you are in a terminal condition or persistent vegetative state. But it's very important because just say something happens and you're unconscious, you then have named an attorney in fact who can step in and assist with healthcare decisions. One of the big things that people worry about when they're doing these documents is that they're giving all their power away. But the documents, at least as we draft them and most that I see, specifically state, as long as I'm able to be involved in decision-making, I will continue to be involved in my decision-making. When I first started doing these, we would, people would name their oldest kid, then the next, and then the next. And I've gone to, all of your kids, or if it's not children, let's say it's other family members or a spouse, probably want to be involved. So give some thought to whether you can have co-agents. My siblings and I act as co-agents, all four of us, for my mom. We have a very cooperative, easygoing relationship. So that might not work in all families, but in ours, it does. So it is something that can be considered. The next document you really need to have is what's called a legal, or a lot of people refer to it as a financial power of attorney. So if you can't manage your own financial issues, or you're just ready to start turning over, taking care of paying bills and things like that, the financial power of attorney will allow that to happen. I like double checks for the aging client. So I like to see co-agents on that. I know there's others that have a different view, but I just like the cross check, especially when you can't do something for yourself. I was going to mention with respect to the healthcare powers of attorneys, when you do check into an assisted living or go to the hospital, they'll ask whether you have a DNR. And that's a subject for a whole webinar, but just
Mhm.
know that that's a conversation, something you should be aware of. One of the things in some states, what you can do is they have rules about end of life sustaining orders. In some states, they have binding laws on physicians, but even if you have an elder that you're caring for in a state where that's not legal, you can still have, where it's not legally binding, not that it's illegal, you can still complete one and provide directions. They're just not necessarily binding, and you'll rely on your healthcare power of attorney or attorney in fact to create them.
Mhm.
The other documents you should have in place are a final will saying what happens to everything when you do pass away. And Stacy and I are both big fans of irrevocable trust, because if you put items in irrevocable trust while you're alive, then you can initially be the trustee. Your attorneys in fact or successor trustees can step in and act. And if you coordinate all your financial assets with that revocable trust, it simply makes it really easy. A lot of times I hear attorneys say, well, let's just put assets in the trust when mom or dad can't do something for themselves. Personally, the last thing I want to do right now while we're moving my mom into a facility is to run around and retitle her assets. I did that 20 years ago, so it's all taken care of. So I'm an advocate for current titling in an irrevocable trust.
Well, thanks for that, Mary. And it, the legal stuff ties into the financial stuff so much. And Stacy, you happen to have your JD and your CFP. Talk to us a little bit about some of the primary financial considerations.
Again, planning, I'm a huge plan ahead kind of person. And so thinking about things like this, again, when you're not forced into a decision. So thinking about maybe purchasing long-term care when you're in your 50s, educate yourself about what benefits those kinds of policies provide. Thinking about aging in place. Is your home a place where you could age in place if you didn't have, health issues like memory issues that required you to be in a safer facility? Having a 2-story home is not real conducive to aging in place. Work with your financial professional to help run projections for you. I heard from my aunt the other day saying, well, we can't afford to move into, an independent facility.
Mm-hmm.
And I remind them, well, you're going to sell your home. Hopefully you don't have a mortgage on it, but even if you do, you're going to probably walk away with some proceeds. You're not going to have expenses, all the expenses that you have today, like real estate taxes and homeowners insurance and some of those utility costs. The senior communities provide, a lot of those things as part of your rent, so to speak. So you actually may be able to afford moving into one of those communities. And shoot, who doesn't want to move into a place that gives you 3 meals a day, light housekeeping, and, in some places even does your laundry and you don't have to do dishes every day? I'm thinking, why can't I move into one of these places? So, I'm really planning ahead and working with a financial professional to help you work through those things. There are also, if you were a veteran, if you're married to a veteran or you had a parent who was a veteran, there are veterans benefits that are available. They are somewhat means tested, but you should know those are out there. And like anything, especially when dealing with the government, you need to get ahead of applying for those benefits because it can take some time.
Well, we've talked a lot about all the help that you can get in elder care, but Marion, this is what you do all day long for a job. And talk to us about some of the other support networks, support agencies, and people that are available to help us in this as well.
There is so much support out there, and we could go through so many agencies. A key takeaway is that support is there. A great place to start in our area is the Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging. They offer so many programs and services, many of them free of charge. If you're looking for senior centers, they have lists of senior centers to start with activities. They've got the Meals on Wheels program, respite programs for caregivers, as both Mary and Stacy talked about. That's so important. They've got grandparent programs if you're looking to have your loved one hook up with a child, if that will help with the isolation. They've got companionship programs that will actually call you daily. So that's a huge resource. It's also important to know, vision and hearing are often issues as you age. And so we've got Outlook Nebraska, which helps the visually impaired. You've got the Radio Talking Book Service, and that will help you stay current on events. They will read to you. Even the public libraries have access where you can get novels read to you. You can check out books. So key thing is there are so many resources out there. It's just asking questions, because you ask one and they might not be able to provide the resource, but they will know where you can go. So ask questions.
Thanks, Marion. Mary, Stacy, any resource in particular that you've really appreciated?
I think trying to find somebody like Marion to help you connect is hugely helpful, because Stacy and I are really intelligent people and are very capable of going through every single facility, but there's a lot of options that can help provide you, this is what's out there. And I think that's one of the things I think is really important, is you don't have to call every assisted living facility yourself. You don't have to call every geriatric office yourself to figure out. You can find somebody who can help you sort through the options.
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stacy.
I agree. I mean, just remember, you are not an island. You're not alone. There are resources available to help you, and it is 100% okay to ask for help.
As we wrap up, are there any closing thoughts the three of you'd like to share?
I just think that the way we care for our elders is so important. Societally, I think there's less value on elders than there are in some other societies and that there has been in the past. And the dignity of the aging process is, I look at my mom and my uncle who's 94, brilliant human beings who have actually done amazing service to their families, but to this country as well, that I think helping elders find dignity as they age is just invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. And support services, again, are out there. So if you don't know how to tap into them, please find someone who does.
Well, thanks so much to the three of you for joining us today. A few comments as we wrap up. First of all, this has been recorded and you'll be sent that link. Secondly, if you send in any questions, we will make sure that any of those get answered. If any questions have arisen and you haven't sent those in, please know that we're available to help with any of those as well. Some of you who are joining us today are clients of Vanderneck Weaver or Foster Group, and we want to thank you for joining us. Some of you are not, and we are here. Both these firms are here to help you, and we want to encourage you to reach out and let us know how we might be able to help you. And the final thing I want to say is that we want to make these better and better each time. So you'll be sent a survey, and we'd love for you to fill that out so that we can continue to get better at doing these webinars. So thanks again to the three of you. Thanks again to all of you joining us. And we'll see you the next time. Bye.